Hello guys, how's it going? I hope you're enjoying those lessons, okay? Today we're going to talk about another kind of creativity block. Last class we talked about the educational blocks. Today we'll talk about the job market block. It is interesting to talk about job market, right? Because that's where you're gonna be after you finish college, isn't that right? And crazy changing world like the one we're living in, every day a different problem is born. A different challenge is born. And then we have to think in different ways for solving them. As we saw in the previous class, we can't try to use the old answers for the new problems because it won't work. What solves new problems is the power of creativity. We have to create new solutions for new problems. So, to start with, the first kind of job market block is the specialist block. This block is all about all the inputs we get through our experiences. Steve Jobs once said that innovation is usually the result of connections of past experiences. But the problem is that if you have the same experiences as everyone else, it's very difficult to look in a different direction. That is, if you have similar inputs as everyone else, you're going to have similar outputs, We could translate this as problems of the GI-GO paradox. Do you know what GI-GO means? Garbage in, garbage out. Usually, you can think that the output problem is generated by an input problem. If you get a bad input, you're going to have a bad output, of course. So if you get bad data or bad experiences, you're going to have a bad way of creating new solutions. That's basically it. Now, being a professional in a world like this, there was a guy called Tim Brown who said that an ideal professional for a future workplace or marketplace is a professional with T-shaped skills. Do you know what a T-shaped skill is? Imagine the letter T, okay? The vertical line represents your specialized knowledge about something. It's deep, okay? But the other line, the horizontal line, it's your general knowledge. It's about the few things you know about many different subjects. So, if we have agreed that the creativity is made by combining different things, the more generalist you are, more possibilities of combining your inputs you have. When your generalist part is very well developed, your universe of inputs gets bigger. In other words, we could say that the vertical line is acquired when you study really hard specific subjects. You get a deep understanding about them. And the horizontal line is developed by your curiosity about different things. So you could say that curiosity is very important because when you're curious, you get more experiences, you get more inputs, more data, more information. And by doing that, you grow your possibilities of combinations, Remember that we are born very curious, but we unlearn to be curious after we're blocked. We are born questioners, but we unlearn to be questioners during our life. But please, let me make myself clear here. It's not a discourse against specialists. I am a specialist at some subjects, It's a discourse in favor of generalism, because it's also important. And in a crazy world like the one we have now, it's more important, in my opinion. So, if you want to be a specialist in any kind of subject, go for it. That's okay. But don't forget to develop your generalist knowledge as well, okay? And now, let me show you an old tale that will exemplify this block a little better, okay? You see? Did you know this little story? Well, I don't know if it's true, I can't confirm it, but some people say it is true, okay? In fact, that's a good example of what we're talking about here, the specialist block, okay? What I want to show you here is that mindset, that fixed mindset in which people believe that only specialists can have great solutions for specific problems, that is not right. It's wrong. As in that example we just saw, if you have an engineering problem, people tend to think that only engineers can solve that problem well. But that's not right, okay? Anyone who think about the problem can solve it in a creative way. That is the lesson that we must unlearn here, because this kind of mindset doesn't allow you to access your repertoire, right? So, if I could give you one little piece of advice here, it would be an input hunter. And for that, prioritize 3 things. Number 1, quantity. It's really important to have a great number of inputs. Number 2, diversity. More important than a great number of inputs is a great diversity of inputs. Remember, if you have always the same inputs as everyone else, you're difficultly having different outputs as everyone else, okay? You have to diversify it. And number 3, rarity. Because when it's a very common subject, thousands of people are already thinking about it. You have to have a rare source of data, of information, you know? You have to be random sometimes at picking up information, okay? For example, when I travel by plane and I will stay like 10, 11 hours on the plane, I usually, in the airport, before boarding, I buy different kinds of magazines, different from the ones I usually read. You know, magazines talking about farming, talking about, I don't know, fashion. That's something that's not on my current repertoire, let's say. And in the plane, I read about those different subjects. Maybe, I'm just saying, I learned something in that magazine that in another day, for example, I can combine what I learned with a problem I'm having here and then come up with a totally different solution for that. Okay? So remember, quantity, diversity, and rarity. Okay? Okie dokie, so let's move on to the next job market block, which is the busy block. The busy block is about those people who say that they don't have time to think about creative solutions because they believe they are busy at doing something else. Many people tend to think that if they are busy in their professional life, if they have meetings all day, if they have things to do and they don't have time for doing much else, they believe that they are doing well in their professional life. I don't know, maybe they are, okay? But not always. Some people say,
Whoa, I have a really tight schedule. My career is really taking off.
I don't know if that's 100% true. Usually, when I offer some kind of course for students to take, even when it's a free course, the question that usually comes to their mind is, but what is the workload of hours for this discipline? How many hours does it take to finish this course or something like that? They believe that education can be measured by studying hours. No, it can't. Education is not measured by number of credit hours. Education is measured by learning. In the same line of thought, production can't be measured by production hours. No, production should be measured by production per hour, which is productivity, right? Therefore, it's no use to be busy if you're not productive. You're just busy. And still in the same line of thought, creativity can't be measured by hours. How many hours are worth an insight, for example? We may never know the answer for that. By the way, do you know the difference between input and insight? An input is basically raw information. When you get the information, the input, you don't know what the application of this input will be. On the other hand, insight is the applied input. In other words, you can think of input as being the information and insight as being the revelation. I am telling you this here because if you are always busy, then you don't have time to think. And if you don't have time to think, you don't have time to get those insights. It's like you're living on the autopilot model, okay? That's what we call the busy block. It is when you don't invest time on thinking. Remember, if you invest time on thinking, you will have more possibilities of getting those insights we were talking about. And by doing that, you may even save some future time. I will leave here for you in your virtual environment a great piece of reading about people who don't have time to think. It's actually an article from the New York Times newspaper. The author writes about people who don't have time to think and tries to explain what it causes and what are the consequences for that. One thing you have to remember here is that from the previous classes we talked about the 4 stages of creative process. Do you remember them? Preparation, incubation, illumination, and verification or implementation. The busy block, this one we are talking now, is very related to the incubation stage of the creative process. If you don't have time to turn your inputs into insights, then all your creative process is broken. Therefore, you can't achieve the creation. For that, I'll show you here 4 different ways for doing this incubation part a little better, okay? It's the 5 T's for incubation, okay? Number 1, take a walk, which was Steve Jobs' favorite way. Whenever he got stuck, he used it to say he would take a walk and try to forget his problems for a bit. Number 2, take a ride. Drive your car around your common destinations, turn the music on and let it flow. Mainly when you're driving on your autopilot and you don't have to pay much attention to where you're going to. Number 3, take a nap. Have you ever told anybody the following expression, I will sleep on it? What does it really mean? It means to postpone a decision until you have slept through the night, as if you were going to think through the decision while sleeping. That's exactly what the incubation is about. Time to think, time to consider something. And number 4, take a bath. Who never had a brilliant idea while taking a shower? To take a shower is another powerful time when you don't have time to think much about what you're doing because you already know everything. Therefore, it gives you time to think about other things. But for the incubation stage to work, I will remind you what Louis Pasteur once said. Did you ever observe to whom the accidents happen? Chance favors only the prepared mind. So guys, as you have seen, you have to be prepared for the incubation part. You can't just skip number 1 in the creative process. You have to be prepared. I will show you now a little part of a documentary from BBC in which they show how the insight appears for us, okay? So, I'll leave the whole video available for you too, okay, in the virtual environment, so that you can watch it later. And I say, it's really nice, okay, it's really important. Do that. So, do you know what those 4 ways for incubating better that I just showed you have in common? They all have some time for visual distraction, even when you're driving your car. Because when you're driving your car to your common destinations, you already know all the scenarios you get there. Of course, you have to pay attention to the driving part, but not for the scenario itself. That is why so many companies around the world have invested in some leisure times for their workers. The biggest lesson we need to unlearn here is that taking some time off to think about the problems will make you less productive. No, this sentence is not correct. Because, as you saw, if you don't have time to think, you don't have time to incubate. Okay guys, So we just reached the end of this video, and I'll see you on the next class. Okay? Bye. Thanks.